by reading from the foreword to his book, The Sun Does Shine. The foreword was written by attorney Brian Stevenson, who is the author of Just Mercy and the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. And so I quote here Mr. Stevenson. On April 3rd, 2015, Anthony Ray Hinton was released from prison after spending nearly 30 years in solitary confinement on Alabama's death row. Mr. Hinton is one of the longest serving condemned prisoners facing execution in America to be proved innocent and released. Most of us can't possibly imagine what it feels like to be arrested, accused of something horrible, imprisoned, wrongly convicted because we don't have the money needed to defend ourselves, and then condemned to execution. For most people, it's simply inconceivable. Yet it's important that we understand that it happens in America and that more of us need to do something to prevent it from happening again. Mr. Hinton grew up poor and Black in rural Alabama. He learned to be a keen and thoughtful observer of the harsh realities of Jim Crow segregation and the way racial bias constrained the lives of people of color. He was taught by his remarkable mother to never see race or judge people because of their color. He resisted mightily the notion that he was arrested, charged, and wrongly convicted because of his race, but he ultimately couldn't accept any other explanation. He is blessed with an extraordinary sense of humor, which he relies on to overcome the racial barriers that condemn so many. He lived with his mother until he was in his late 20s and worked as a contract laborer. He had never been accused of a violent act before his arrest. Mr. Stevenson concludes, visiting Ray Hinton was unlike any other legal visit for me. Never have more guards, correctional staff, and prison workers pulled me aside to offer assistance or question me about how they could help than during the many years I have worked with Ray. I have never experienced anything like it. I have represented scores of condemned prisoners during my 30 years of law practice. Many of my clients were innocent people wrongly convicted or condemned. However, no one I have represented has inspired me more than Anthony Ray Hinton, and I believe his compelling and unique story will similarly inspire you. I must tell you, Mr. Hinton, that having read your book, I indeed was deeply inspired and touched and deeply disturbed by your experience and the story that you tell. And so I want our audience to hear it in your own words. So in 1985, you were arrested and charged with 2 capital murders, crimes you did not commit. The supposed murder weapon was your mother's gun, but the evidence didn't exist. You were at work miles away at the time of the crime. You passed a polygraph. The bullets were never proven to have come from the gun, but none of it mattered. You write in your own book, I was born guilty, Black, poor, without a father most of my life. So by way of introduction to all of us, could you please tell us about your personal reaction when you realized the system would fail you and how that impacted your family and your community?
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me today. Early in my life, I realized that the moment I was born Black in America, I was at a disadvantage, as I call it. I was guilty. And never did my mother and my wildest try to persuade me to believe otherwise, that we was equal, we all came from God, and he loved all of us the same. And growing up believing in that and having that type of faith that, there are some bad people and it's just part of life, never did I realize that one hot July morning, I would wake up, be arrested for a crime I didn't commit, and I wouldn't see the place that I lived for 30 long years. And I never will forget, I woke up like any typical morning, and it was already about 10 o'clock, 85 to 90 degrees. And my mother had made some lemonade And I went inside to get a glass of lemonade. And my mother looked at me and she said, "Are you going to revival tonight?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And in the South, we say yes, ma'am, because of our respect for our elders. And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I poured that glass of lemonade and went outside and drank the lemonade. And about 15 minutes later, I brought the glass back inside. And my mother asked me, she said, "What time do revival start tonight?" And I said, "7 o'clock, Mom." And she looked at her watch on the clock on the wall and she said, "Well, you got time to go out there and cut that grass." Never have I been so disappointed. Never did I want to cut any grass in this heat. And I looked at my mother and I said, "Mama, I promise you I will cut that grass tomorrow." And my mother looked at me and she said, "I'm trying my best to see how did you get. You will cut the grass tomorrow out of me telling you to go cut the grass." And I dropped my head and I looked up in my mom's eyes and she said, "Boy, you better get out there and cut that grass." I goes out and I fire up the old lawnmower, and about 25 minutes into cutting the grass, I just happened to look up and there stood two white gentlemen that I never seen before. And I cut the lawnmower off and I said, "Can I help you?" And one of them replied, "We're looking for Anthony Ray Hinton." I said, "That would be me. How can I help you?" And they said, "We have a warrant for your arrest." And I said, "For what?" And one of the officers said, "We can't tell you that. We just want you to put your hands behind your back." I complied. They put the handcuff on me and proceeded to put me in the squad car. And I said, "Hold up, police allow me the opportunity to tell my mother I'm being arrested for something." And the detective said, "We can't let you go back inside." And we stood there and we exchanged words for about 2 minutes. And finally, the other detective said, "Let him go in and tell his mother he's being arrested." I goes in and I just show my mother the handcuff. And like any good mother, she began to scream and holler, "What are those handcuffs doing on my baby?" And one of the detectives said, "Take him out while I stand here and talk to his mother." A few minutes later, they comes back and we proceeded to go to the county jail. And I remember them asking me, "Anthony, do you own a firearm?" And I said, "No." I said, "But my mother has an old 38 Smith & Wesson that she keep around the house for snakes." Once I told them that, they dropped me off at a substation, secured me in that jail, and then they turned around and came back to my mother home, and they told my mother that I had told them about a pistol she had. And my mother went and got the pistol and told, and she gave it to them. They came back and they picked me up and proceeded to the county jail. And I kept asking the detective, "Why am I being arrested?" They never would tell me. I had to ask the detective at least 50 times, "Why am I being arrested?" Never would say a word. And as they drove a little further, I said, "Detective, why am I being arrested?" And this seemed to set the detective off that wasn't driving. He turned around and he looked at me and he said, "You want to know why we arrested you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "We're going to charge you with first-degree robbery, first-degree kidnapping, first-degree attempted murder." I said, "Oh, you got the wrong person. I haven't done any of that." He looked at me and he said, "Let me tell you something right now. I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it, but I'm going to make sure you found guilty of it." I said, "For a crime I didn't commit." He said, "You must have a hearing problem. Didn't I just tell you I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it?" And then, I mean, just a little farther. He turned around and he said, "By the way, there's 5 things that are going to convict you. Would you like to know what they are?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Number 1, you're black. Number 2, a white man is going to say you shot him. Whether you shot him or not, I do not care. Believe me, I do not care." He said, "Number 3, you're going to have a white prosecutor. Number 4, you're going to have a white judge. And number 5, You're going to have an all-white jury. And he said, do you know what that spell? And he repeated the word conviction, 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 conviction. And as we got to the county jail, they put me in a holding cell. And I had been in that holding cell for about 2.5 hours. And finally he came back and I said, detective, what date and what time did this crime take place? He went in his files and he looked at the date and the time. He told me, and I said, thank God. And I said, thank you, Jesus. I said, thank you, Jesus, because my supervisor was white. And I figured once I tell him that my supervisor could tell him that I was at work, everything would be okay. I told him my supervisor name, gave him his phone number, gave him the address. He left about 5.5 hours later. He came back and he looked at me and he said, I have good news and bad news. He said, the good news is we no longer going to charge you with first-degree robbery, first-degree kidnap, first-degree attempted murder. Your alibi checks out. He said, in fact, I saw you on video at work. He said, but we have now decided that we're going to charge you with 2 counts of first-degree capital murder. I said, but detective, I haven't killed anyone. I haven't robbed anyone. He said, do you remember me telling you coming here, I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it? He said, the same thing is for this crime. I really don't care whether you did it or didn't do it. And with tears coming down my face, I looked at this detective, trying to convince him that I could never take a human being life. And finally, the detective looked up at me and he said, let me be honest with you. I truly believe you didn't do it. He said, but y'all always take up for one another. Take this rap for one of your homeboys who actually did the crime. I looked at that detective with tears in my eyes, and I said, detective, I could never take a human being life, and I could never take a rap like this for one of my homeboys. I sit in jail for 1.5 years. I goes before a judge. That judge asked me, did I understand the charges that was being brought against me? And I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, how do you plead? And I said, not guilty, Your Honor. He said, do you have a lawyer? Can you afford a lawyer? And I said, no, Your Honor. And he looked back in his courtroom and he called this lawyer up front, told this lawyer that he wanted him to represent me on 2 counts of first-degree capital murder. That lawyer did not even ask me my name. That lawyer said, I did not go to law school to do pro bono work. He said, they only gonna pay me $1,000 for this case. And I eat $1,000 for breakfast. I looked up at this lawyer and I said, sir, would it make a difference to you if I told you that I was innocent? For the first time, that lawyer looked at me and he said, the problem with that statement, all of y'all are always doing something. And when you get caught, you say you didn't do it. This is the lawyer that I had to believe was going to represent me to the best of his ability. This is the lawyer that I believe that was going to give me his best. But to be honest with you, that lawyer did just enough to make it legal. And they found me guilty of 2 counts of first-degree capital murder. That day, that judge stood up proudly and said, Anthony Ray Hinton, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers, and it is the order of this court that I sentence you to death. And that judge had the audacity to say, may God have mercy on your soul. He sentenced me to death. The prosecutor that prosecuted me perhaps said it louder than he had intended to say it, but he said these words. He said, we didn't get the right nigger today.
You know, I'm listening to you, and the emotion and the pain is still very present, understandably, and I can't conceive of what you went through. And I want us to go through the story, but I want to come to the finish of the story, and then we're going to go back through some things, if that's all right with you. So it was 30 years that you sat on death row almost, until Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative proved you're innocent, pushed the case to the Supreme Court of the United States, where your conviction was overturned by a 9-0 unanimous vote. And then on April 3rd, 2015, you were set free. So given the emotion and the raw feeling that this horrible injustice felt to you at the beginning, and then for 30 years, I'm curious, how did you assimilate that final vindication within yourself? Did you look back? Did you look forward? Can you talk about the day at the total end of this journey where you regained your freedom?
I didn't look back while there during the time. My faith had sustained me. My faith had given me an outlook. But more important than anything, I had forgave the men that got together and decided that they would put me on death row. And I had gave Alabama all that I could give them 30 years. And I had made a promise that when God freed me, I was going to live the best life that I could, regardless of what it was. And on April the 3rd, 2015, the day that I walked out of that jail, I walked out to a sun that was shining brighter than it had ever been shining in my life. I looked up at the sun, and inside of me, I said, the sun does shine. I looked over there at Bryan Stevenson to see was the sun shining on him, and I couldn't see it. It looked like as though it was a light just shining directly on me. And I wanted the world to know that God had brought me through 30 years of pure hell. I wanted the world to know that regardless of what one goes through, it is important that you have faith and believe in that faith. My mother had told me as a little boy that God can do everything but fail, and I felt at some time that God had let me down, but I realized later that he hadn't let me down. He was paving the way for my freedom. And so when I was finally set free, I walked as though I was walking on clouds, because for 30 years I never heard or never allowed my mind or anyone to tell me that one day I would be free. I didn't want nobody to tell me that, not knowing for sure that I would be free. And I can't even explain it to that stage, that feeling, the joy that I had, that I was finally set free. But I have to be honest, it was a mixed emotion, because my mother had passed and she wasn't there to see her baby boy walk out of prison a free man. But I held on to every fiber that my mother had taught me. I stayed rooted in my belief. I stayed grounded to who I am, and I stayed true to my belief. I stayed true to what my mother had taught me as a child. And those are the things that got me through 30 years of being locked up in solitary confinement.
And it's remarkable to me that your faith was that deep. And that's one of the things I'd like to explore. There's two things that you tell in the story that are just so striking to me about your personality going through this ordeal. One, as you've just discussed, is your deep faith. And the other is your vivid imagination. And so if we could, I'd like to explore each of those for a moment. When you were sentenced, you said to the court, "Wherever they send me, God can hear my prayers."
Yes.
No, what would really make me worried, you said to the court, is if you could isolate me from God, but you can't do that. You took me from my family, but you can't take me from God. And then you later on explain, you write, "I had a faith and a God and a Bible that promised me I would get out of here someday." And you remarkably say, "I was better off than a lot of guys next to me. We were all facing death, but I was facing it with love all around me. I tried to focus on that more than on the fact that my life had been stolen from me." Can you elaborate on that kind of faith, where it came from and how it sustained you?
Oh, it came from my mother rearing me up at the age of 4, making us go to church, reading the Bible to us. We never had money, but I honestly can tell the world I had love, unconditional love from my mother. She taught me that God loved me unconditional. And as a little boy, all the way up to the age of 29, I believed in that. I felt the love from God. I felt the love from my mother. And when I got put in this cage, I knew that the only thing that could survive me and keep me and sustain me was the love that my mother had given me in God. And what I meant about I was better off than a lot of those men, as I listened to them, they never did talk about God. They never did say, "Well, I truly believe that one day God is going to do this and God is able to do this." But I used to say that I know the God that I serve will one day open this door. And I used to get questioned, "Well, if he can open it, why did he allow you to come in here in the first place?" And at that time, I didn't realize, because as I read my Bible, the book of Tyler tells me to avoid foolish questions. And I thought that was a foolish question, because that told me that that person that asked me that didn't know the God that I was serving. I truly believe that God allowed things to happen in all of our lives so he can show us who he truly is and what he's capable of doing. And so I just sit there day after day, believing that God would one day open that door and set me free. But in the meantime, God allowed my mind to be free. Of all the people in the world and all the places to go and all the folks in the world to visit, I wanted to visit Queen Elizabeth. And people say, "Why did you want to visit the Queen?" Well, for one reason, I felt that the Queen had been sentenced to life without parole herself. She, as a girl, she couldn't do what girls would do, and she was taught how to walk because one day she would be the queen. And I felt that all of her life she had been in prison. And so in my mind, I wanted to go see her, and in my mind, I did go see the Queen. We sit down and we had tea, and I never forget, as I was sitting there talking to the Queen, she looked at me just as I'm looking at you, and she said, "Mr. Hinton, would you like some tea?" And I told the Queen I would love some tea. And she asked me, "Mr. Hinton, what would you like in your tea?" And I told her spot of lemon. Once I realized that my mind could go anywhere at any time I choose to take it, I realized, hey, I'm going to use this mind for every day. I'm going to go somewhere. And I used it. I played baseball for the New York Yankees. I played basketball for my pathetic Knicks. I played Wimbledon. But the thing that bothers me more than anything, that I won Wimbledon in my mind for 5 straight years. And I have yet to receive my Rolex watch from Wimbledon. But I got to the point that I was trying to tell the other men, listen, we may not be where we should be, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to make this the best place, the best home that we possibly can make it. We're going to do it with love, and we're going to have love for each other, and we're going to care about one another. And after that, I would show them that what love can do for you, what love is capable of. And I began to show them a different side. Don't hate. For when you hate, you're allowing love to just sit there and be no good to you. I said, learn to love the gods. Learn to love everything about your life. And God, for whatever reason, just gave me the mindset to go and visit. I got married. I married 2 of the most beautiful women in the world right there in prison, Halle Berry and Sandra Bullock. I mean, who in the world could be in a 5x7 and marry 2 of the most beautiful women that God had ever planted on this earth? I did. And I often tell people, guess what? Today, we still are the best friends. In my mind, I still laugh with them. I still talk to them. And I apologize to them for putting them in a world that they didn't actually come in. But I want them to know that they helped save me, because I was around men 24/7, and I just wanted the president to talk to a female, and I did that. And I didn't use my mind for anything but to glorify God and to make my life and the men's around me life better.
So your resilience and your faith is just so compelling and so moving. And I know everybody listening to us today respects that and appreciates that. But I have to take you back to the beginning a little bit. Your first 3 years in prison, you didn't speak a word. And
Absolutely.
You write in the book that there was some anger and you were blaming the world. And who could blame you for that? Totally understandable, right? So I'm curious how it happened that in your soul and in your mind you said, wait, this is not the way I'm going to spend this time. What brought about that change to the remarkable story you're now telling us about your faith and your resilience?
Well, when I was first convicted and I got to prison, and I got in that 5x7, and the only book they would allow you to have was a Bible. And I was so angry, to be honest with you. The thing that I love more, the human side of me came forth. And I was so angry that with God, I was more angry with God than anyone. Because all my life I've been taught that God can do everything but fail. God love you, and God would do this for you. And I kept wondering, where was God when I was being lied on? Where was God when I was being persecuted for a crime that he knows and I know that I didn't commit? Where were you, God? My mother told me that you can do everything but fail. You failed me, God. Where was you? What did I do, God, so bad that you would allow me to come to this place? And for 3 years, I refused to talk. And I said that God didn't live here anymore in my heart. But I wanted people to understand, not one time did I ever say that I didn't love God. Not one time did I ever say I didn't believe in God. I was disappointed. The human side of me made me disappointed. And going into the 4th year, what made me come out of that, I heard a grown man crying. And my mother had taught me compassion, and my mother told me no matter what one does in life, they still deserve compassion. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, when I heard this man crying that I had lived by for 3 years and never asked him his name, that compassion made me get up. And I went to the bars and I said, sir, I didn't mean to holler and get the guards back here. And it took this man a while to reply, but he finally said, no, I just got worried my mother passed. I told him how sorry I was to hear that. And I told him if I could do or be any help to him, please let me know. I sat on my bunk, and that's when I said, thank you, Jesus. My mother's still alive, and I'm still alive. and I'm going to make this the best life that I possibly can make it. Because I realized at that moment, even in someone's death, how much I had to be thankful for. I was having a pity party for 3 years. I was blaming God for where I was. I was bringing racism from where I was. And I was allowing all of that to destroy who I really am. I'm a person that loves to make people laugh. I believe that laughter is great for the soul. And for 3 years, I had allowed them to take that from me. And then I realized that God don't make mistakes. I realized that one day I truly believe that I would understand why God allowed me to come to this place. And I truly can tell you today, I truly believe that I know why I went to death row. And not telling you right now, I am often asked, if that's what I truly believe, would I do it again if I had to? And I would do it in a heartbeat.
So I'm listening with such admiration, Mr. Hinton, and I want to pursue with you a quick thought that this incredible sense of living and gratitude and faith, which you say stems from your mother, and I totally appreciate and respect that. It also led you to have this incredible sense of forgiveness. You claim that you have to forgive these people who did this horror to you because it's actually selfish of you, because forgiveness is less about them and more about you. And
Absolutely.
beside you, you had your mother until she passed, and you had your dear friend Lester.
Yes.
This had to create the environment that allowed you to flourish in soul. What do you think?
I think it did, but at the same time, for about, I would say at least 10 years, 15 years, I had allowed the hate that I was feeling for the men that had got together and put me on death row for a crime they knew that I hadn't committed. And I've always believed that if any of us ever want to be free, the only way you can truly be free, you have to forgive. And every morning I would wake up and I would look in the mirror and I began to realize I didn't like who I was looking at. And that was me. For I have always been a person that loved to smile, loved to laugh, and loved to hear other people laughing. There's no other sound in the world is more beautiful than when you hear people laughing. And one morning I looked in that mirror and I didn't like who I was looking at. And I decided at that moment, I was going to take my life back. And I prayed to God that he would remove that hatred that I had for those men that had conspired and put me there. And not even in the 30 years that I was there, not one time did I ask God for my freedom, because I really believe that would have been the most selfish thing that I ever could do, is to ask God to free me. If nothing else today, I want everybody that is listening to understand you must be very careful what you ask God for. And if I had asked God to free me, God could have freed me in death. You see, the rats that was running around in the cell could have bit me and I could have died from a rat bite. The spiders that was running around in the cell, one could have bit me and I could have died from a spider bite. But I did something that a lot of people find unusual. I went in my Bible and I was just farming through the pages, and for whatever reason, that Bible stopped on the book of Mark. And in Mark 11:24, it said, what things ever you desire when you pray, believe in them and you shall have them. And I began to pray the prayer of truth. And I said, God, if it be your will, I ask that you allow the truth to come out. And I knew once the truth came out, I would walk out with the truth. And not only did I want to walk out with truth, I wanted to walk out with a spirit of forgiveness, a spirit of love. And I wanted those men to know that I forgive them. And one day, I hope, I pray that they would find enough forgiveness to forgive themselves. But I truly had forgiven them.
I'm deeply touched by what you're sharing. You may or may not be aware that we're about to go into a season of forgiveness in the Jewish religious tradition. And I'm really reflecting on the depth of how this has so impacted your soul and your experience, and trying to really figure out how we can connect to it and understand it in a situation where we're comfortable, not thankfully where we're suffering in the way that you were. I want to go forward to just a moment to today, and then we have a little more time to explore a bit more about your story. But today you are an Equal Justice Initiative community educator, and you're a powerful advocate for the abolition of the death penalty. And I'm curious if you can talk, based on your own experience and what's happening, what reactions you get in your work. Has the system that wrongly convicted you and abused you changed or improved in any way? What are your challenges and goals in this work? And I'm going to throw in one last question from our discussion before we got online here with everybody else. Is we were teasing about Alabama. And you said, no, you have to understand, I have to live in Alabama. So I'd love if you could take us into the current moment of how this experience is playing out now in the work that you do and the life that you lead.
This work is playing out. I think I'm beginning to change people's heart from my experience. I often say I never want to change anyone's mind. We change our mind perhaps 1,000 times a day of what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear. But once the heart changes, it changes forever. And when I stand up and tell my stories, and then I'll tell about how and the trouble that I went through, I think it changed people more when I get to the forgiveness part. Because we in America have been brought up, if someone hit you, you hit them back. If someone do something to you, you get it back. Revenge is mine, said the Lord. And I just try to be one that tell people, listen, my hands is clean. The men that did this to me, they have to answer to God. I want to be able to live a good life, and I want my hand to be clean at the same time. And at the same time, I have to understand that every one of us have had some days of discomfort. And we have had some days that we couldn't understand why me. And I had those same days. And if I can, because I know someone is out there probably listening is going through something, I want you to know that while I was sitting in that 5x7, having that pity party that I told you that I was having, I began to realize that there was some woman out in the free world dealing with stage 5 breast cancer. I realized there was some man out there dealing with colon cancer, and here I was, a healthy man, had 3 meals a day, a roof over my head, a bed to lay down, and here I was feeling sorry for myself. And then I realized that that lady that is dealing with stage 5 breast cancer, that man that is dealing with colon cancer, would probably trade places with me in a heartbeat. And I kept wondering, what is it that I have to have a pity party about? Because regardless of what situation I found myself in, I realized that it was somebody in worse shape than I was. And everywhere I go, people say, do you still live in Alabama? And I said, yes. But why would you live in Alabama after they did what they did to you? And I said, to be honest with you, some of the best white people that I ever met in my entire life lives in Alabama. And if I'm gonna be honest with you, some of the best people that I know live here in Alabama. You see, I couldn't allow Alabama to steal my joy. And if I ran, then I feel like I'm letting Alabama ruin me. You see, the joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it away. And so I wake up every morning right here in Alabama, and I go out and I'm trying to find somebody without a smile so I can give them one of mine. I try to find someone who think they have it bad so I can tell them, I know some people got it worse than you. And I'm here to fight for the death penalty in Alabama, and hopefully fighting for it in Alabama will fight for it around the world. I truly believe we don't need a death penalty in this country, because when we take matters in our own hand, we kill innocent men and women, and we can't bring them back. And that's why I believe that we should always allow God to take what is rightfully his. He is the only one that has the power to give life and to take life. But man have, for whatever reason, felt that they can have a law and they can take your life and they don't care whether you're innocent or not. And then when we kill innocent people, what do we say? How do we bring them back? We can't. And I'm just a man that believes that what happened to me, I don't want it to happen to no one else. And I truly believe the only way we will never kill an innocent man or woman in this country with the death penalty is that we just don't have a death penalty. In that way, I know we won't never kill an innocent person. And so my work to me is important. I learned so much when I was on death row, and I learned that the system is not and have never been fair. The system is not broken. The system is running exactly the way that it was designed to work. And I need my voice to be lifted, and I need people to understand that when the system fails, we all fail. And we all should be more than happy to make sure that no innocent person will ever be executed. We should demand that. But we live in a world where we make mistakes, and we live in a world where there is racism, and we live in a world where politicians don't care but anything to make you feel safe. And we should stand up and say, hey, I don't want you killing anyone in my name. Leave that up to God. And so my work to me is important. It is important that I go out and I share my story, but it is more important to me that I show man and woman the power of forgiveness, the power of love, and the power of understanding. And I pray that everybody that hear my voice will read my book, because there's a story in there about a Ku Klux Klansman, a man by the name of Henry Francis Hayes. And I know what love can do for hate. And I showed him love for 15 years. And on the night of his execution, he returned that love to me and the world by saying, all of my life, my mother and my father and my community taught me to hate. The very people that they taught me to hate for the last 15 years have shown me nothing but love. And as tonight, as I leave this world, I leave this world now knowing what love feels like. And I truly believe that God allowed me to go to prison just so that young man could know what love feels like.
I cannot thank you enough, Anthony, for the inspiration that your story gives us. I can't apologize enough in my own sense of pain for what you went through. But by the same token, you've given me a depth of understanding, both about the circumstance and about things that we teach in our own community. We teach concerns about the death penalty in Jewish tradition. We talk about forgiveness and faith, but you've given us a depth and a context for all of that that is just so moving and so important. And I want to thank you truly, truly for the story that you are telling us, for the magnificent book that you have written. I know that you shared with me that it's the second greatest book ever written. The sun does shine. The Bible comes first.
Yes.
And so we're proud to have gotten to know your story and to have met you. And I thank you so very much. And I'm going to turn over now to Beth, who is going to take our program to its conclusion. It's been a true privilege and honor to visit with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. Charlene, is my video on? Can you guys see me as well?
You're good, Beth. So
I'm good. Okay, because I'm not seeing me for some reason. Wow, Mr. Hinton. Many of the people on the line know me, and those who do know that I am rarely speechless, but I'm pretty speechless. I was thinking very much what Rabbi Shulman said about how we're entering the season in the Jewish calendar, around the Jewish New Year and our Day of Atonement, where forgiveness plays such a big role. And I know that I will come to this season in the in my own observance of this season in a whole different way, having listened to you. So I thank you so much, both personally and professionally, for sharing with me and with our community. And Rabbi Shulman, thank you so much for facilitating the conversation. Fabulous as always. So this was the first of a couple sessions around racial justice, and we had wanted the first one to be about a national, to really take a national look at a pressing national issue, and clearly this is. And then in a couple weeks on August 25th, we're going to be looking at how we can support the Black community here in San Diego. We'll be joined by Donna DeBerry, who is the CEO of the Black Chamber of Commerce here in San Diego, as well as with Kamal Martin from Project New Village, which is a project that's being developed in Southeast San Diego around food justice and health and wellness in the Black community. So we hope that you will join us for that. Before that, on August 18th, we are going to have a celebration, and I was happy, Mr. Hinton, to hear you talk about joy, because this will be a joyful session. For many of you may not be aware, but on August 18th of 1920, the state of Tennessee was the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution, giving women the right to vote. And so we have partnered with Hadassah, with the Jewish Women's Foundation, and with the San Diego History Center, and we'll be bringing you some perspectives on Jewish women and the suffrage movement. There were a number of Jewish women who were very active in the suffrage movement, many written out of history a bit. There was also quite a bit of anti-Semitism in the suffrage movement, so that will undoubtedly be a really interesting conversation. So I hope you will join us for that. And then lastly, I know many of you probably know the Jewish Community Foundation has partnered with the Leishtag Foundation and the Jewish Federation of San Diego County to help Jews in San Diego through the COVID crisis. Those needs are getting more intense as federal funding is mired in whatever it's mired in. So if you go to our website, you can learn more about how to support that effort as well. And now I believe we have 20 names who are people who are getting books. Is that right, Charlene?
That is correct. They'll be coming up shortly. There you go.
So this was random. So congratulations. We'll be getting those in the mail. They are signed. Thank you, Mr. Hinton, for signing those books. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your work, and our warmest regards to Mr. Stevenson. And what we would say to conclude, I think in the Jewish tradition, we would say something that goes Yasher Koach, which means may you continue to have the strength that you have shown to this date to continue to do the incredible good work that you are doing. We wish you much health and joy that God could possibly give you in your journey forward. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Anthony. It was a true delight to meet you and visit with you. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All the best, sir. All the best to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Be safe.